is the Last Minute Blues podcast with Donnie, Alex, Jeremy, and Jeff Burton.
It is the Last Minute Blues podcast. Donnie Fandango, Alex Ferrario, and Jeremy Rutherford here to talk about all things St. Louis Blues. Gentlemen, it's great to see you. I will say, however, though, that I was not looking forward to getting up and going to work today.
No.
Like this 4 days off in a row thing, I could 100% get used to that.
Well, I was looking to get to human interaction. I've been locked in my house for 3 days with my 2 kids, potty training my oldest, so I've been looking forward to adult interaction.
I was
it's great to
really
see
looking forward to be here, Alex. Alex, we're here with a broadcast legend.
The play-by-play legend
The play-by-play legend from the Blues
Color
development camp,
commentator.
Donnie Fandango. You got Ken Wilson, John Kelly, Chris Kerber, Donnie Fandango.
Dude, a couple of things about that. First of all, I was not nervous even leading up to it, and then so I was like kind of ready to interview some players and have it be a little off the cuff. And then 10 minutes beforehand, Alex says, "Hey, Donnie, I don't think you're doing it." And I said, "Okay," but it was still, again, for me to just even be there and to watch and to be a part of it all, man. It's really awesome. I mean, and also, too, I want to tell Blues fans, if you have not had the ability, and I know time is precious for, but if you have not had the ability to go out to Centene and see the team practice or be a part of training camp out there, it's a really wonderful facility. Like, I mean, when you walk in, it just feels freaking cool. And they just did such a really amazing job of bringing in those youngsters and getting them acclimated and saying, "Hey, here's the city." But it was pretty cool, man. I have pinch me moments when we do stuff like that, man.
Yeah,
Like,
that
it's
for me
crazy
was,
to me.
when they told us that they were unable to get the players for the interview, I looked at Donnie and I'm like, "Well, you can go home." But he's like, "Well, I'm already out here." And I said, "Cool, will you just do the broadcast with me and Joe?"
Yeah, it was
'Cause
great.
I knew that we weren't actually doing play-by-play with it. They were like, "Let's just keep it conversational with some play-by-play spilled in." And I'm like, "That's fine, but that's a lot for an hour straight of just 2 people going back and forth." So, and Joey and I could have done it, but I'm like, man, it's going to be more entertaining to get Donnie on there.
No, it was great. And I was listening. You know what happened was I was had every intention to be out in the rink area watching the actual prospects. Isn't that
And
what
then
I'm supposed
Doug
to do?
Armstrong said, "JR, you need to work tonight."
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about the extension for Pavel Buchnevich later, but once that came down, we were in the room together, right, when we were interviewing the agent, talking to Todd Diamond about Pavel Buchnevich, and then I had to sit in that room for like the next hour and a half and write that story, so you can hear the pucks and the people screaming out there. But what I was able to do was I turn you guys on the app on my laptop and listen to you guys. So good job.
Yeah,
good job.
thanks, man. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I want to talk about the Buch extension here in just a second, but before that, I'm obviously not an NHL talent scout by any stretch of the imagination, but in watching that prospect scrimmage, to me, Dalibor Dvorsky was a head above anybody else on the ice there, and that's nothing bad against those other players, but he just looked like he wants it, man. And also too, like, what was crazy is there was like a 2-on-none or a 2-on-1 where he didn't get the pass back and he was staring down the guy that took the shot. Like, I think he was poking around in the corner with somebody. Like, he came to play, and that dude, I don't know if it's this year or next year, is going to be a friggin' player, dudes.
Yeah, I think he was the one that it was night and day. He was playing with kids on the ice.
Yeah.
That's what Dalibor Dvorsky looked like. I mean, he had 1 goal on a shootout that was just silky in his moves, and then he had a goal right at the end of the 3-on-3, I think it was, where he was right on the goal line, Donnie, and he was able to tuck it in between his legs from a defenseman and then lift it top shelf on the goaltender. This was warm-ups for him to get to training camp because he is going to compete for one of those spots. There were 2 other dudes at that prospect scrimmage that we were watching that stuck out to me. One was Lindstein, who I also felt like he was playing with his food out there. And dude was just like, he was figure skating on the blue line with the puck on his stick, which was just wild. And then that Dylan Peterson cat from Boston University, like 6'3", 200-something pounds, and he was just manhandling dudes along the boards with the puck. So I said this after we got off the air, or right when we wrapped up with you and Joe, Don. I called him Don. That's what Joey called him the entire broadcast, and I loved it. He probably heard David Perron call you Don. I said that this group, this pipeline that the Blues have, it's got to be as exciting as what they had when it was Oshie, Berglund, Perron, Lars Eller, Ian Cole. Like, that's what this group feels like right now with possibly more talent in them.
Yeah, and with Dvorsky, guys, how about Doug Armstrong a couple days ago? He said, I like what I read with his comments. And, Doug Armstrong, he's...
Shout out to JR.
No, actually, I didn't write an article, so he might have caught it from a Matt DeFrank's article or something. But what Dvorsky said, for those that didn't see it, was, hey, this is on me. This is on me. And I remember asking Dalbor last week, I said, you can't really show everything in development camp. You're not going to earn a spot in development camp. And he's like, yeah, you can. You can win it here. You can win it there. You can win it everywhere. Like, I'm going to win it every chance I get. And so that's the attitude that Doug Armstrong likes to hear. So he did the best that he could do this week, albeit a development camp. And I think coming into training camp, like Donnie said, might not be this year. It might not be at the start of this year, but this kid is a player.
So, guys, let's just say hypothetically that Dalibor Dvorsky does make the team. All right? What are reasonable expectations for this young man as what is he, 19? Like, I think, listen, I'm excited. I definitely get cart before the horse when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Come on.
But what is a realistic look if that guy makes this team?
Yeah, first of all, this is probably the perfect time, Alex, to tell him that we have a text thread that goes back and forth, me and Alex, and we got cart and horse emoji with you. Every time we do a show, we do the cart.
Cart before horse.
Horse, yeah.
Here's Donnie.
No, kid. No, but with Dvorsky, okay, so here's the situation. A lot of times when these guys come in as centers, and he's going to be a center and play in the National Hockey League for a long time, they'll put him on the wing to start out just because there's a little less responsibility, coming back defensively, playing the 200-foot game. You saw it with Robert Thomas in 2019, right? He played on that right wing when you had Maroon and Bozak on his line. That might be the case with Dvorsky, maybe. You don't know. But the biggest difference, let's just keep using Thomas as the example, is Thomas either had to stay or go back to junior. Mm-hmm. And because of Dvorsky's situation coming over from Europe, those rules don't apply to him. He can go to the American Hockey League. So it's a situation where if he's not up to snuff in training camp, okay, doesn't mean you have to send him back to the Junior Hockey League in Sudbury. He can play with Springfield this year. So I think they're just going to take it as it goes in training camp. But you're right. He's going to take some time. He's going to take some seasoning, especially to play center at 19, 20 years old in the National Hockey League is going to be tough. But he's already showing all those characteristics that I think are going to make for a long career.
So Robert Thomas, that first year that JR is referencing, 9 goals and 33 points in 70 games. And he was 18 years old when he made that NHL group. And remember, he was scratched a lot that season because they wanted to just get his legs under him. So, of course, Ferrario and his comps. I've mentioned multiple times. Here, get ready for it. I've mentioned multiple times, he reminds me a lot of Wyatt Johnston with the Dallas Stars.
Yeah.
And Johnston, at 19 years old, 24 goals and 41 points and played all 82 games with the Dallas Stars. I think you're probably expecting, if he makes the team, which I don't know if he will, somewhere between Thomas and Johnston. The part that I'm confused by is how you use him. Because I don't think you're going to throw that dude into the center position right away, especially for how many centers this team has. Like they've said, Buch can play center. You've got Braden Shen. You just traded for Radek Faksa. You've got Oscar Sundqvist. I think that Texier can play center if you need to. They got a lot of dudes who can do the center position. If I'm them, you play him on a wing and just let him get the feel of the NHL. Obviously, he's got the skill against prospects. What's he look like against NHL-level players? You'll get that vibe in preseason. But, Wyatt Johnston did 24 goals in the first season. I'm not saying he's going to score 24 goals, but could he be a 15-goal scorer that first season? If he plays a full year, I think so.
All right, so I want to talk about the moves that the Blues made, or lack thereof. I don't know how you want to look at it, but we'll talk about that in just a second. But I do want to bring up, obviously, the Pavel Buchnevich contract extension. Listen, I got to tell you, I'm surprised a little bit by this. Not at all because the Blues wanted Buchnevich here. I love Buch. I just thought the timing of this was just not going to kind of match up as to where the Blues are going, where they're at now, and where Buch wants to be. But it seems as though Doug Armstrong made a very convincing proposition to Buch about staying here and about the future. And so we have got this young man here for the next handful of years, and I'm stoked to have Buch here. It just is one that I think I'm still a little bit surprised by.
Yeah, I think surprised that Pavel Buchnevich went for the 6-year deal. And, I've said it for months leading up to the announcement of the contract the other day that, if he's going to be 30 when it kicks in, You want a contract that takes you to 37, 38 so that you're not looking for a new contract at age 35, 36, somewhere in there. But having listened to the agent, Todd Diamond, we didn't get a chance to listen to Pavel Buchnevich because he's in Europe, but I think we're going to get him this week on a Zoom. We'll hear from him. He said, look, he doesn't want to be a distraction, so he wants to get this done sooner than later, so they get it done now instead of waiting to the during the season when they could have. And then secondly, he said he wants to earn his money. He doesn't want to collect a paycheck. And what a comment by Todd Diamond, relaying how he feels that Pavel Buchnevich is thinking about the situation. And how refreshing is that? For us, we cover, the NHL, and you hear about all the guys, max term, biggest dollars, holding out, things like that. And here you have a player in St. Louis who, A, wants to be here, and B, his agent is saying, this guy wants to get to 36, and then if he's still producing and he's still happy, then we'll talk about some more years, but let's get there first.
That sounded like the perfect prototypical Blue when I heard Todd Diamond say that. It was like he wants to earn his contract. I mean, how many times has Blues fans comped players to work boots and want them to go out there and work real hard and, put on those work boots? And, that's what essentially Todd Diamond said about Pavel Buchnevich, is he's not going to just go get a contract. He wants to work and he wants to earn that contract. So I thought that was really good. The moment that it's signed, because I was still skeptical they were going to get something done because I was in the JR camp. I'm thinking if I'm Buch, I want 7 or 8 years. I'm not going to deal with this. Give me a 5-year deal. And Doug Armstrong essentially told us that the offer from the Blues was a 5-year deal,
right,
and they wanted a 7-year deal. And Doug laughed and said, I caved, which right, I don't know if Doug normally caves. So that's a pretty big moment for Todd Diamond and Buch. But I thought it was the right move by the Blues. I'm not saying I thought it was great. I didn't think it was awful. I thought it was the right move.
Yeah.
6 years, I feel like, is a sweet spot because you're 36 years old, and even if it does decline, which we'll find out with Buch if it does, you still got 4 of those years right in that competitive window that the Blues are expecting. And for the going rate on players in the National Hockey League, 6 years at $8 million, just like we're talking about Kyrou and Thomas 8x8, the going rate for a player like Buch when he becomes a free agent, he probably could have got, for how the cap's going up, 7 years and $9 million if he would have played to that level this year. So it's the right move by the Blues because you can stay competitive. He is the right type of player, so you're not throwing Dalibor Dvorsky in on the penalty kill all the time or throwing Zach Bolduc on the number 1 power play unit. Now you've got Pavel Buchnevich who can do all of that, and you can slowly progress those younger players into the positions they need to be, that by the end of his contract, now they're able to take that massive workload, and Pavel Buchnevich can take a lesser workload, kind of like Alexander Steen did.
Absolutely so. So, all right, I've thought a lot about the free agent pickups over the course of the last few days. Pardon me. And then, obviously, the swarm around NHL free agency the first day or two was pretty crazy. But after thinking about this a lot, obviously talking to you guys and things, I feel as though that the Blues have gotten better in their bottom 6 and maybe better overall as a team, but it seems as though every other team in the Central got markedly better. Markedly better. And so I wonder if the Blues are actually better. I said that way too many times.
Did that hurt when you said that?
Yes, it did. It came out the wrong way. But I feel like they might be incrementally better than they were when the season started last year, but could still miss the playoffs next year. I don't know. I look at it and I go,
I think you nailed it. I think you said it perfectly.
With the sound effects, too.
Yeah. I think you nailed it because that is the situation. And, look, the Blues had no business being in any of those types of free agent deals that we saw. And, I know for a fact that they inquired, talked to Chandler Stevenson's camp, but way too much. 7 years.
7 years.
7 years.
6.25. Now, he would have made you competitive, and he could have moved to wing, later, whatever, but not 7 years.
Not 7 years.
Not 7
And what was it, $6 million?
Yes.
6.25.
Yeah, there's no way.
Not a chance. So here's the deal, Donnie, and Doug, it's got to be hard for him to not, what's the word we use, marketably?
Whatever. I don't even know what
cart
that word is.
before the horse.
Yeah, cart before the make the Blues better
Florissant
this
Valley
year.
Community College, right here. Sorry.
Well, because the opportunity is there to make your team better if you want to, right? And they want to be a better team than they were last year. They want to make the playoffs, but unless you're getting involved in those conversations, you're probably not, making a good case for yourself once the season starts that you're a playoff team. So, you make some ads, which they did in the bottom six. They're bigger, they're a little bit faster in that bottom six. A couple of shrewd moves. I mean, your future considerations for some big guys.
And a third-round pick for another one.
Yeah, get a third-round pick back. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not a second-round pick, but everybody was complaining about giving up the second to get rid of Hayes. Well, you get a third back in this deal. So, anyway, I think that you nailed it. They're a better team on paper, I think, than they were last year. And you're still going to need some good performances from a lot of people to be in that 90-point conversation.
Can you tell me about this fella from Columbus that we got? Because in doing my reading, there were some Blue Jacket fans that thought that Doug Armstrong fleeced the Blue Jackets on this particular one, and that they could have got, or that Columbus should have gotten more for this young man than what the Blues paid for him.
I mean, from everything I've heard, and I read Aaron Portzline's piece talking about kind of who he was, and then your piece talking with Portzline. I mean, it's a 24-year-old forward who was projected to be a top six guy for Columbus, and then fell out of grace in Columbus. Which, falling out of grace in Columbus, I mean, that
I don't know what that means.
That's not a shot against the player. I think the show that is the Columbus Blue Jackets of multiple different head coaches, and you've got a lot of guys. You bring in Johnny Gaudreau. Like, there's no development with him. It's, hey, become a NHL top six winger for us or centerman for us, and it didn't work. I mean, anytime you take a chance on a 24-year-old dude who I think he was drafted in the second round, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to give him a longer look rather than a guy that you're bringing in at 27, 28 years old, like let's just say Matthew Joseph. Matthew Joseph's been in the NHL. You know who he is. 24 years old for the Columbus Blue Jackets. I feel like there's still untapped potential there.
Yeah, so here's the deal. I talked to Aaron Portzline, who covers the Blue Jackets for The Athletic, and this is what he said. He said that going into last season, he had a broken finger. Was it last season? Year before. Either way, he had a broken finger, and he was getting ready to come back, and everybody was ready for him to come back to the Blue Jackets. And then he had some issues with being away from home. And I don't know if it's actually considered the assistance program, because when you think of the assistance program, you think of drugs and alcohol. It was not drugs and alcohol. When I say this, I'm repeating information that I heard. It might have been like depression related, need to get back home. So he goes back home, and he played the year in Europe. And so that was 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, 2 seasons.
And then he came to Columbus, came back, and they said he just didn't show the same type of player that he was when he was in Columbus previously. Mm-hmm. So even though his numbers were okay last year, it just wasn't the same type of player that he was before he went to Europe. So, I wrote the other day that he's got some upside, but he's still a flyer, and I think that's kind of appropriate. In talking to Portzline, he said, look, when I saw this guy 2 years ago before he went to Europe, he looked like a really good player, he could be. So what Alex says, 24 years old, hey, let's give this guy the benefit of the doubt. It's just, I think, in Columbus's mind, Columbus fans' mind, looking back at last year, it's like, okay, well, this isn't the player we thought he was going to be.
Well, and sorry, Donnie, to me, it felt like round 2 of what the Blues tried to accomplish with Jakub Vrana. To where
I was just going to say that.
Oh, see, great minds think alike. Did put the cart before the horse on that one. I like that. But the first thing I thought of was, okay, well, they did Vrana 2.0. They found another guy who might not have been what they expected from him in the team he was on, and they said, well, let's give him a shot in our top 6, top 9. And that at least seems like what they're hoping to achieve with him. And he falls right into the age bracket that Doug Armstrong was talking about. And you've got 2 years of control before he's an RFA. So that, to me, felt like it was the perfect deal for the Blues.
And these deals, maybe not that one in particular, but in bringing the Joseph brothers in and Foxa, making the team a little bit meaner
and bigger.
Which
I think is the most important.
Which they needed. Uh-huh. There were definitely many times last year where we were in this room going, do these guys know that they're getting housed and care about it? So we need some guys with a little bit more P and V in them, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see the video? They've got a video out there somewhere. I think Sportsnet put it out where the Joseph brothers are playing each other, Ottawa versus Pittsburgh, and one with high sticks the other.
Yeah, I think Matthew cross-checked P.O., and then P.O. high-sticked Matthew in the face. It was amazing. And his parents were in the crowd.
Parents were in the crowd, and one's wearing Ottawa jersey, one's wearing the Penguins jersey, and they're both just throwing their arms up in the air.
We tried. We did the best we could, but this was our basement.
So it's not the Kachuk brothers, but you still got the Joseph brothers out there, which I think is at least something for Blues fans.
Speaking of which, they do the exact same commercial as the Kachuk brothers do. So Kachuk brothers have Chantel mom in the front seat of the minivan, and they're in the back seat fighting. Same exact script, same exact commercial. It's out there. You got to YouTube it, but it's the Joseph brothers. And, if people don't know necessarily who we're talking about, the Blues traded for Matthew Joseph from Ottawa and then signed a free agent, Pierre Olivier,
I think it was.
Joseph, and that's his younger brother by a couple years, and they're going to be teammates here.
And he was in Pittsburgh last year, Pierre Olivier, and then I think he was doing like the AHL, NHL back and forth, and so he's got NHL experience. I think Army referenced him as tall and lanky left-handed defenseman.
And they're both defensemen, though, right?
No, Matthew's a forward.
Okay,
Yeah.
Matthew's a
Matthew
forward.
won the Cup with Tampa Bay, playing on their fourth line that I think included Pat Maroon and Ross Colton. Like that fourth line that won back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, Matthew Joseph was a part of that fourth line for one of those years. And then they got into their cap hell and traded him to Ottawa. And I remember last year in Ottawa, they were talking about trying to trade him last year because it was a cap dump, because they knew they were going to be in cap hell. And I think there were a lot of teams, including the Blues, that were interested last year, and it never came to fruition. And then this offseason it happened. That was one that I think I was most excited for, because that's a big forward who plays wing, who plays with a pissed-off attitude and goes to the front of the net.
All right, so I want to talk about a couple of NHL things here very quickly, especially the Steven Stamkos situation. But before we get there, and I already know the answer to this before I ask it, but it seems as though we will be going into the season next year with the same sexy defenseman that we had last year.
What are you talking about? We got Pierre Olivier Joseph, left-handed defenseman.
All right.
Added to the mix.
added to the mix.
How did Donnie do that?
I mean, listen, I don't want to continue to bash this group, because to me, I don't think that they're a group that deserves bashing. It's not like it's terrible. It's just as though we feel as though this is an area of the team that could be better.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not bashing. It's just it needs changing. And it's tough to say, because what it boils down to, because Parayko's not going anywhere, Leddy's not going anywhere, Justin Falk probably not going. So it comes down to Torrey Krug, right? And I don't want any of this conversation. Even when I sit down to write an article, you don't want to okay, this is all Torrey Krug's fault. It's not. It's not. It's not his fault. It's just that when you look at a group as assembled for 2 or 3 years in a row and you see what the ceiling is, it's not getting any better. So it's not necessarily Torrey Krug's fault. It's just that he's the part that makes sense in this equation to probably move, if you can move him, if there's a taker, if he's willing to waive his no trade clause. A
lot of ifs.
A lot of ifs. So two different ways to look at it. One is, I feel like the Blues are probably looking at the situation as, we might have to come back with the same D next year. That's probably how they're looking at it, unless that phone call comes in, hey, we're interested. But I'll tell you guys this, in talking to Doug Armstrong twice about this in the last couple of weeks, once in Vegas and then once the other day, Alex, when you were out there, is that whenever you ask him, hey, what about the defense? He says, well, you can make trades, and we'll just see in July and August what's out there, and that's all I can really say about it. So I still think he is hoping, wishing, wanting.
He's working the phones.
Yeah, he's working. So I would not be surprised if the three of us are driving down the highway in 3 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is, and all of a sudden, the announcement comes, the tweet comes, whatever, that there's been a trade. I would not be surprised if we still see something between now and training camp.
I wouldn't either. I think it really, you've got 4 or 5 teams that are still over the salary cap. I think there are 2 teams that are under the salary cap floor that need to get to it. So, there's always where teams need to shed salary and shed players, which could be the defenseman that replaces Torrey Krug, and there are always teams that need to get to the cap floor. And then there's injuries that take place. So, there's always something. The part for me when I heard Doug talk in Vegas, and then when we heard him talk the other day, is I also think it's important to look at it as it might be the same defenseman players, but I don't know if it's going to be the same defenseman ice time. Mm-hmm. To me, Matt Kessel's going to be getting a lot more ice time this year.
From the jump.
Yeah, from the jump. So, now that's going to take a little bit of minutes off of Justin Falk's plate. And then if they re-sign Scott Perunovich, they obviously think that there's still something else there. And if Scott Perunovich is here, my gut tells me there's going to be more ice time for Scott Perunovich if he's healthy than Torrey Krug. You might be seeing more power play time for him. And then you've also brought in this P.O. Joseph that they have. You also have Tyler Tucker that they have. I'm not so certain it's going to be 23-plus minutes a night for Colton Parayko and Nick Leddy, 21 minutes for Justin Falk and Torrey Krug, and then everyone else. Like, I do believe Drew Bannister probably sees and understands what the game plan here is of developing some of these guys. That means more ice time and more responsibilities for Matt Kessel. That means more ice time and responsibilities for Scott Perunovich. The other factor into all of this, they brought in Claude Julien for a reason.
Yeah.
And part of me, and I know Bannister talked about, like, we needed to be better on a defensive side, and you got a former head coach that's with us. Part of me wondered that they said, if we're running it back with the same defense, we need to find somebody who can get more slightly improvement from this group of defensive players. Because you saw the best of Parayko, you saw the best of Leddy, you saw the best of Matt Kessel with a higher ceiling to achieve. And I actually thought it was just a down year for Justin Falk with injuries, and you hope he gets back to what he was the year prior. That's where Claude Julien came in my opinion, where it's like, okay, if they run it back with the same defense, they're going to have a different mindset going into the season.
And that's just a great point, because if the Blues come back with the same unit, there's your ad, Claude Julien. And,
Yep.
I know Torrey Krug, he respects Julien, and the defense in Boston got better when Julien – not left, but, I think the players enjoyed the new coach Cassidy's system better.
Mm-hmm.
They like playing that style better. But Julien has a long track record of getting it done, and he can lift this group.
I really liked the attitude and what we heard from Drew Bannister about having Claude Julien on the staff. Essentially talking about, hey, there's so much that I can learn, and I can obviously learn from a guy like this. And I feel like sometimes as a young coach, maybe you run the risk of feeling like, man, is this guy going to take my gig? Am I leaving myself susceptible? And I thought Bannister was like, nah, man, this guy's going to make us better. I want more people that are going to make us better, and I really like that.
Isn't that great? I mean, it's like I was worried about bringing Alex into the podcast.
It's true.
Just he's such a big talent. And then I'm like, but I can learn. I can learn from Alex. He just made the great point about Claude Julien. Like, I'm going to leave here and go, that could be an article.
JR should be very nervous because I'm starting my own subscription company of just writing stories about the Blues this season, so watch out,
So
I'm calling it The Unathletic.
I'll fit that.
Well, real quick, guys, because I know we have to wrap up here, but I want to ask about a few things. I think one of the things that I am most I don't want to say shocked about, but it's surprising to me is Steve Stamkos not being a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning and getting a pair of friggin' cowboy boots and going down to Nashville. Guys, I know that this is hokey and naive, and it's not how this works anymore, but seeing Steve and Stamkos in a jersey that is not the Tampa Bay Lightning is going to be weird and doesn't kind of feel right. Also, in doing a little bit of research on that particular team and all the moves that they have made, I keep going back to folks saying that their center depth is a real friggin' issue, even though they made all of these signings. Can you guys speak to that a little? Kind of both of those things, the Stamkos thing, and then, oh my God, is Nashville as good as they very well might be?
Yeah, just touch on Stamkos. And yeah, it's tough to see a guy who's been with the organization. I mean, it's like Yzerman in Detroit, right? You see Stamkos, you think of the lightning bolt. But I think it's a situation where tough moves, tough decisions have to be made in this salary cap era. And when, he's been paid well, they've, taken care of him all these years. But when a guy is going to be 35 towards the end of the contract, it kind of doesn't matter who it is. And unless you want to take that big risk and sign this contract, and in 3 or 4 years he's slowing down, and you're like, well, we had to do it. No, you didn't have to do it. You didn't. You did not have to do it. You've got some other players that you can sign, and look what they did. They made the big trades with Sergachev, right? Mm-hmm. And then they opened up that money, and they signed Gensel to the big deal. Younger guy, still produces, and now they're set up better. And I'm always a firm believer of people are going to get over feelings at some point. Yeah, it's sad and it's going to be a tough time. Tampa next year, you start the season, no Stamkos, but your team's going to be better for making moves like this. And it's not to say he's a bad player. He's going to go to Nashville and do well. But Nashville's in a little bit of a different spot, and Alex can talk about how good they're going to be. But Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen, Jonathan Marchessault, who's going to be hungry because what did Vegas do? They wanted to offer him a deal that was deferred. How hungry is this guy going to be to show Vegas that they made the wrong decision?
Philip Forsberg on that team.
Philip Forsberg, that line.
Well, and that's why I didn't like the way it went down with Tampa Bay, because I feel like it was such an icon for an organization that was bad for such a long time. And then I think the report was they offered him a 6-year deal worth like $3 million. And it's like, man, I don't know if I liked the low ball offer for the guy that like is your franchise, and then you give Victor Hedman the exact same contract that Stamkos got in Nashville. But if you give me two guys, a franchise centerman or a franchise defenseman, I'm going to take the franchise defenseman.
Sure.
Especially when you traded the young guy that was supposed to be the next Victor Hedman, so you could keep Victor Hedman and go get another offensive weapon. So, like, I get it. I didn't like the way it went down, and I think a lot of people aren't going to be happy with Tampa Bay, kind of to the same light that it happened in St. Louis when Petro walked. It's like, oh, man, not a lot of people could get over that so quick. But on the Nashville side of things, I mean, another team's demise with the cap problem is Nashville's benefit. Like, I mean, and they capitalized on everything, I feel like. They already had the franchise goalie, the franchise defenseman, and a 40-goal scorer on your team. Now what do you need? We just need more offense. That's what kept them out of advancing in the playoffs last year. Like, they didn't have a good enough group of forwards that could get past Forsberg, O'Reilly, and I think it was Nyquist that's playing that top line. And now you go out there and get a dude who's been a point-per-game player every year for like the last 10 years, and Jonathan Marchessault, and you also brought in a left-handed defenseman who you could put in your top four. Like,
oh, God.
Donnie is not going to be happy with this, but now look, I do think it's very important to say, like, everybody always looks at a team on paper and is like, this team's going to be unbelievable, and then they falter. Like, LA was supposed to be the best team in the Pacific Division last year, and what happened? They had to fire their coach and trade away the guy that was supposed to be the best signing that they made in Pierre-Luc Dubois.
You're just trying to cater to Donnie here.
No. I know Donnie's going to bust out the cowboy hat and he's going to head down there with me to a concert. But
I will get into a fight.
That's why I really want to go. But I do think it's important to temper expectations. Like, Nashville looks awesome on paper, but if one injury happens, what do they look like? And sometimes, as we saw in 2019, chemistry doesn't click right away, and it takes a couple of months to figure out. So I loved what Nashville did. I'm hoping that the Blues are in the position that Nashville is in a year or two from now because of all the cap space that they'll have. But Nashville just pounced. And frankly, in my opinion, I think they're the second best team in the Central Division.
I just think they're going to win the Cup, Donnie. That's all I think.
And then we're going to hear Rascal Flatts. The Stanley Cup final.
Real quick. Tarasenko to the Red Wings. What do you think?
I was surprised Florida didn't bring him back. I was really surprised. Now, I know they don't have cap space. They wanted to keep Sam Bennett, but I thought that Vladdy would have gone maybe for a little bit cheaper to stay in Florida, but Detroit, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know if I would have done what Yzerman did and go to Vladdy instead of David Perron, because I feel like David Perron matches more what they're trying to accomplish, but I like it. Like, at least Detroit's trying.
Yeah. And then our buddy David Perron, who's
friend of the show.
Friend of the show. We can absolutely say that now. Friend of the show goes to Ottawa, looking like they're needing some leadership up there, and looking to David Perron.
Yeah, 2 years, $4 million, and I sent him a text, said the show congratulates you on your contract,
Don, specifically,
and he said thanks, Don, JR, and Alex.
Listen, guys, he can call me Phyllis. I don't care. I just don't. I really don't.
That'll be a good reference next time we have him.
And how about we talk about just how good he is in terms of off the ice, and it was a heartfelt tweet to Detroit fans, thanking them, which other players do it, I get it, but his seems like it's coming from an unbelievable place. And then he sends Ottawa one, sending out tweets to both franchises.
And French.
Yeah.
Sent it out in French and English, so he's just attributing to all of them.
You're really doing the work there.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's doing the legwork.
Because you could be lazy and just send that out in English, and nobody would say a thing about it.
Just translate to French for me, please.
All right. So, unfortunately, we've got to wrap this thing up today because, my God, I don't even remember everything I have to do today. I got a lot going on here today, and so we will be back here soon with more Blues talk. Thank you very much for listening to the Last Minute Blues podcast. For Jeremy Rutherford, Alex Ferrario, and our boy Jeff Burton, Donnie Fandango, thanks for listening, and as always, let's go Blues!
The Last Minute Blues podcast. Hear more at 1057thepoint.com.